Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for watching part 1 of Still Missing, the Jennifer Kesse case from Orlando, Florida. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, here's the time to hit the pause button, go watch part 1, and then come back and we'll be waiting right here for you. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So let's pick up where we left off in part 1. It's January 24th, 2006. Jennifer Kesse fails to show up for work at Westgate Resorts. Westgate contact her emergency contact, which was her parents. Her parents get in one car. Her mother and dad come to Orlando. Her brother and one of his friends, Travis, come to Orlando. Her boyfriend from Fort Lauderdale ends up driving up to Orlando. Her condo is entered by management with her parents on the phone, and then when her parents get there, they don't notice anything out of the ordinary or awry, seemingly from what they can detect from the inside of her condo. It seems as if she went to work that morning, the morning of the 24th, and her car is missing. It's not in the parking lot, in its assigned parking space. Out of the local newspaper, the Orlando Sentinel, here's the first clipping on her case, mentioning how she was last heard on Monday night, didn't show up for work the next day, Tuesday. The family members describing such behavior as uncharacteristic, and that her car was still missing. So the OPD puts out a bolo on Jennifer and her car, and it was finally circulated that Jennifer was missing and look out for this car. And I believe that this bolo information was aired on television, and that's how this lead was found. A female resident from Huntington on the Green saw the local news, and the suspect vehicle looked like the one that was right outside in the parking lot outside her place. And this resident called the police shortly after 8 a.m. 2 days later. And so this was the first big break in the case. As luck would have it, seemingly no one had stolen this car, and I just want to let you know this was a bad area. And this car had an exposed DVD player in the back seat. Mind you, this is 2006. That's a stealable object. That's a stealable item. So 2 days later, Jennifer's black 2004 Chevy Malibu was found 1 mile away with her valuables inside. And I want to submit to you, the absence of evidence is evidence. Seemingly her disappearance did not involve a robbery. As the vehicle was abandoned, it's worth money. With some property inside, that was worth money. Her car was parked at the Huntington on the Green condominiums located at South Texas Avenue and Americana Boulevard. It's a rough part of town. It's known for drug dealing and stolen cars. It is the same street as the street that Jennifer's condo's off of, because what happens is Americana goes over the parkway. It's a straight shot and becomes Conroy. So basically it's one of those streets where it's the same darn road, but when it goes over a parkway or a highway, it's renamed something else. But essentially, as the crow flies, it's pretty much a straight shot. The consensus of opinion from family and from friends is that Jennifer would not have gone to that part of town. And since in any missing persons case, you're going to first look at friends and family, the police endeavored to do that, and they took it upon themselves to bring her boyfriend, Rob, to the found car in order to watch the opening of the trunk and to probably watch his reaction to the opening of the trunk. And you know what? Maybe it's a good thing that she wasn't in that trunk, because could you imagine the trauma that he would have the rest of his life had she been in the trunk? But she wasn't in the trunk, and he obviously did not give them any kind of suspicious reaction. Also want to note for the record, he had an airtight alibi in Fort Lauderdale, 3 hours away. And also note the Kesse family still to this day view Rob as a son. And he is essentially, for all intents and purposes, not a suspect. So 2 detectives returned to the Huntington on the Green that Thursday afternoon to look at a security camera system that had a view of the spot where Jennifer's car had been parked, okay, where it had been dropped off and parked. And they didn't say at this point if there was film of who abandoned the car. Again, I think they call that holdback evidence. So here's an aerial photograph of the Huntington on the Green complex, which is down the road from Jennifer's place, 1 mile down the road. And I believe where the yellow pin is generally where her car was dropped off. And you see the pool area there, and you see the little clubhouse. I believe that this area, like on that clubhouse, was where one of the security cameras were located. I believe there was 2 or 3 security cameras which had video. Now, the public didn't know that there was actual video because the police held that back and simply released some still shots from the videos. The police retrieved the video surveillance, but they also found out that throughout the lifetime of the system, and it had been taped over multiple times, meaning the tape wasn't fresh. So, the images were not that clear. They're not that clear. And the fact that the suspect gets lucky in the way that the bars of the fence cover his, or I guess her, I think it's a him, his face. And also the timestamps in the video were 1 hour off. So just take note that when I mention things, I will use the exact real time. And the public got to see a crappy still like this released by the police department, saying that this was a person of interest in the Jennifer Kesse missing person case. Through this episode, I'm going to show you different people's attempts to clean up this image. So you'll see different versions of this image. I like the colorized one the best. I think it's the most accurate. So let's go through what we've heard that the police recovered. So camera 1, which I'm not showing that here, is a grainy surveillance video capturing a suspect leaving her vehicle in the visitor parking lot near that pool where, I had the little pin in the previous picture, that area. And it's really impossible to see what's going on. You can't make barely out the car, much less a suspect in that video. And it shows a car pulling in, her car pulling in, and then selecting a parking spot and then backing up and pulling forward. You know how people straighten their car up? Like they don't just whirl into it and leave it alone. This person pulled into the spot and then backed it up and pulled it forward, kind of straightening the car out. And you got to say why. That's part of it. Why did that suspect do that? Also note that now we know, by knowing when the video was recorded, we know that the crime was committed by noon the day of her disappearance, if you believe that she disappeared that morning. Between the time that she would have left for work, if we believe that she left out of her house, and it's bookended by the time this suspect is dropping her car off and she's not with the car anymore. So you can pretty much nail down a timeline. So one can assume that if Jennifer left for work, let's say 7:30 or 7 a.m., and the car was placed at Huntington by noon, we know this by the fact of the video camera with the timestamp, when we revise the proper time on the timestamp, that's a known window of time. The grainy surveillance video showed that Jennifer's car was driven in and dropped off hours after the crime. The suspect remained sitting in the car for approximately 32 seconds. This is allegedly what's on the video of camera 1. So he didn't just pull in and run away. He pulled in, he straightened the car up, and he sat in the car. I keep saying he because I think it's a he. Sat in the car for 32 seconds, perhaps wiping down the vehicle or waiting for the coast to be clear. Because think, even though the video looks dark, because that's the way the camera looked, it wasn't dark outside. It was noon, okay, during the week. So I also wonder who was in that pool. Was anybody in the pool area? Were there any kids in the pool when this happened? Seemingly the vehicle was wiped down because one partial fingerprint was found, but it was Jennifer's fingerprint. A minuscule amount of DNA, that's a partial DNA profile, was allegedly found on some fabric. Maybe the partial DNA one day can be reconstructed with some new technology, so we can always hope. Looking at the police photos taken of the inside of her vehicle, there seems to be the imprint of a shoe or a boot as a smudge in the driver's footwell mat area by the gas pedal, if you look at the pictures here. So here's the footwell area without my circles. And here's where I think I see an impression of a shoe. You see that? And absolutely looks like it's the left foot. And you see this. It almost looks like the same size impression of a shoe with the same sort of patterns. And I don't know if that white area in the middle of where I've circled is maybe construction dust and stuff. I don't know what that was. The driver's seat was seemingly moved to adjust for a person with smaller legs, and Jennifer was 5'8". And then strangely, I've also seen where someone had mentioned how the driver's seat was moved all the way back. So I am totally perplexed about that. I do know that the driver's seat was moved. That part we can, I guess, agree upon. No signs of a struggle were noted inside of the vehicle, and there were valuables left in it. I think it was the back seat. The VCR or DVD player had been strapped in with the seat belt, and I believe that was how it was placed in the car. And allegedly, some of her valuables were in the trunk still. No blood or bodily fluids were found in the car. And if Jennifer was incapacitated and placed in her car, there would likely be some trace evidence like urine, blood, pulled out hair, things like that. I mean, it is still possible that the perp used her vehicle to dump her somewhere, but it's just not as probable that there wouldn't be any kind of forensic evidence suggesting such. This screenshot is from camera number 2, a video that was taken from above the clubhouse at the pool, and it captured the suspect, the person of interest, strolling away from Jennifer's vehicle. The video captured time in 3-second intervals, and each frame of the suspect had the pool's iron fence blocking the suspect's face. This is like got to be the most lucky person of interest in Florida. The suspect who left Jennifer's vehicle seems to be slight in stature. Seems to be between 5'3" to 5'5", based upon all the different agencies that did the algebra and the physics on this. I don't know. There was a debate that made the height up to 5'9" in height. The FBI looked into it to try to figure out the height. It doesn't seem... I mean, my dad's a rocket scientist, so I guess I think out of the box, I think there's definitely no way you couldn't nail this down. I mean, if you know the distance from the wall, okay, to where the fence is, and then you can see the sidewalk here, and you can see about the portion of the sidewalk that he's on. If you know the height of the camera, all right, so that's your height, and you know your length generally, you know your height, and then you measure the angle that the camera goes down, and then you measure that to the top of the fence line, how high that is. You can, triangulate and get a really good idea of how tall this guy is. I mean, it isn't rocket science. So let's just regard the suspect. This is the person who is in the car that drove into Huntington on the Green. It was Jennifer's car that was dropped off in the visitor's parking lot. This person sits in the car for 32 seconds. We don't know what they were doing because it's all out of frame, seemingly probably wiping the car down or waiting for the coast to be clear. This person exits Jennifer's vehicle, goes walking around the pool area at Huntington on the Green. We can't see the pool from this picture. We don't know if there were kids in the pool that could perhaps have seen this person. We don't know, but we can look at the picture in front of us and make some assumptions. This person's thin. The hair could be in a bun or a mullet fashion. I personally see a bowl cut with shave sides, where you have like the thick dark hair with like the shaved sides around the ear. That's how I see it. He appears to be wearing baggy clothes. I see like a white or light colored shirt. I see maybe khaki pants or painter's pants. I see high top black shoes. I see big feet in all the pictures. I see either someone that's gangly and hasn't grown into their feet yet, or someone has big feet, or they're wearing shoes that are too big. Because when you look at the different pictures together, there's something weird with this fella's feet. So note the person doesn't seem tall, and the average height of, say, a Latino male is smaller than the average non-Hispanic male. There's a lot of reasons that people believe that this could be someone that's Hispanic. This is a Hispanic part of town. That's one good reason. Also because of just the simple anthropological structure. If they're shorter, and you got to think of where you are, there's lots and lots of Hispanics in this area. Again, this picture here is a compilation picture. The person of interest has a walk of confidence. They just stride right on out of there. So years and years later, the Kesses end up suing OPD for the case file because the case was cold. And the family has released some pictures of the car's hood, which clearly show what appeared to be a struggle on the hood. I don't think I'm looking at clouds and seeing elephants here. I think most people can see what I see when I'm going to show you by circling it. Here, I think it's clear that a struggle went on. Allegedly, Drew saw this and said, "Oh my gosh," and they contacted one of the detectives, and they said, "Yeah, that was your scene of the crime." Really? Okay, so you knew the whole time that somebody attacked her on the hood of her car? I mean, get out of here, right? Get out of here. So I've circled what I think are clearly handprints. I think you see the left hand. I think you see the right hand. I think that she was likely attacked over the light. It would be the car's left headlight. If you're looking straight on the car, it would be the right headlight. I think that she was pushed down on her stomach and that her hands went out in front of her. And I think you can even see where the briefcase. She probably had the briefcase in her right hand, and you can even see an imprint of where something rectangular at a diagonal was slammed up against the hood and then drug backwards. You can see the hand scrabble in that left circle. Do you not see finger scrabbling? To me, that's clear. I mean, that's a hand. That's finger mark scrabbling. I wonder, was Jennifer stun gunned that morning on the way to her car for work? She walks down the stairs from her condo. She's fully dressed out for work in her 3-inch heels that they haven't found and her briefcase. And she makes it almost to her driver's seat, which would be the side of the car she would be interested in if you're on your way to work. And then all of a sudden, what you see here is what looks like handprints going backwards, or some kind of a struggle that went on the hood of her car and is now been left in the dust and the dirt and the debris. Now, this is the job of the CSI to do this kind of stuff, to take the pictures, to gather the evidence. Once the car's released to the family, it was a leased car. It's not necessarily their responsibility to keep it around forever and ever and ever. You know what I'm saying? Especially something like a car where it would have to be warehoused. They allowed the police allegedly like 3 times access to the car, and the FBI had access to the car. So whatever was taken that could be eventually was. However, I got to wonder, when it was in the bay, when this car was in the bay after it had been discovered, why in the world didn't they take the hood off this vehicle? If one of the detectives looked at that hood and knew that it looked like a struggle went on the hood, and I understand they didn't tell the family at that time, I get it, that they didn't tell the public, looks like there was a struggle on the hood, that they were holding back this evidence, why in the world didn't you save the hood? Because the hood was not saved. So we have good reason to believe that Jennifer actually dressed out for work that morning. She took a shower at her apartment. She walked out. She locked the door behind her. Her car would be in her parking space by habit. Gets down to her car. Then there's what's evidence of a struggle on the hood. Doesn't look like she was incapacitated in the car or that there was any kind of harm to her that, came of her in the car. Like there's no blood in the car. There's no urine in the car, on the inside of the car. one would think that since this was dropped off by 12, that the time, the window for this crime to occur probably was between 7 a.m. and 12. So that's a 5-hour window at the widest. If Jennifer did not make it into her car, is it possible that she was perhaps taken to one of the many empty apartments right there at Mosaic? Or is it possible that there was a van right next to her parking spot, or one of the ones nearby, and perhaps she was simply drug off the hood of her car, perhaps immobilized some way? I don't know. People have said chloroform. I think you can do that, but doesn't that leave a scar, like a burn on your face, if it's not appropriately applied? I don't know. I don't know if she was stun gunned or chloroformed or hit. We don't know, but she could have been just thrown into a nearby vehicle. Here's another random picture that was released. It shows what looks like her gear shift with a broken mailbox key. I found out that those tablets are aspirin, and I believe that is a car charger that's kind of almost wrapped around that gear shift. Do you see that? But like I said before, the absence of evidence is evidence, and there's evidence of by what wasn't taken. I mentioned that a DVD player was in the back seat. That was expensive in 2006. It was still strapped in there in public view. Allegedly, there were some of her valuables still in the trunk. I don't know if Jennifer's briefcase was left in her car, like in the trunk. Jennifer's keys were not in her car, so seemingly the suspect walked away with her keys. 2 pairs of flip-flops were found in the passenger side footwell, and according to the amount of gas remaining in the tank, the car was seemingly not driven really any extra amount than it would have taken from this car to get to Huntington. In other words, this car seemingly was not driven like 100 miles out of Orlando and then 100 miles back. No. Now, you can sit there and say, is it possible that she was put in another car and driven elsewhere? Absolutely. But seemingly this car, by the amount of gas still remaining from her previous fill-up, hadn't been driven all that much. So, to me, that information alone narrows the pool of suspects. Now, granted, you can still have suspects that I guess are viable, but you can put them into the outer circle. Seemingly, whoever took this car from Mosaic and drove it right to Huntington and got out and sauntered past the security cameras, that person had a timeline. And the car's mileage and the gas left inside pretty much tells you, hey, I wasn't driven a lot. I wasn't driven far away and then, driven right back. So after the resident had seen the newscast with the bolo and noticed the car matching that, was out in the parking lot and called the police. The police realized it was Jennifer's vehicle, and they had CSI come out and they impounded the vehicle. And this is the vehicle on a Johnson's tow truck being towed off. And after they then retrieved the condo's security footage, the videos, and they watched it and found that the video of the car driving in, Jennifer's car driving in, and then the footage of the suspect leaving, even though it was grainy, that they saw that. Why wasn't that footage immediately aired to the public? And I know there's that thing, okay, we're going to hold this back because we can narrow out certain people due to the fact they wouldn't look like the person of interest here. I get it. However, we know that in retrospect, precious time was lost. Time in which someone could have identified the suspect by using the public and the press to get the information out in the public eye. And, this just wasn't done. The help of the public should never be underestimated. That's one reason I'm doing these videos. Even if it's small, it's a little ripple can create a wave. And long story short is they needed to stop and let the public know what the suspect looked like and give them a more firm timeline. And also they needed to ask themselves, why that parking lot? Why Huntington on the Green? Why only a mile away? Okay? Why in a bad part of town, where you go from essentially a quote unquote, high end part of town with the mall Millennia and Jennifer's luxury condos, and then right down the road where it's a rough part of town. Why was the car taken there? And the next bit of information / evidence is the bloodhound. This is going to answer the question, why? Bo the bloodhound was on the scent while Jennifer's car was parked at Huntington on January 26th. A scent dog, Bo the bloodhound, from the Orange County Sheriff's Department, scented and trailed back right to Jennifer's complex at Mosaic and right next to the stairwell near her condo. Okay, so that was the front stairwell overlooking the water. So I believe they had Bo sniff the driver's car seat, and so he would be scenting on the last person that sat there, and he seemingly tracked that last person that sat in the car. That would have been the person of interest's walk, and it just so happens to be the same path that the person of interest took around the pool, down the sidewalks, all the way down to her condo, and then right to her particular stairwell. What a coincidence, huh? And to make it even weirder, he didn't go to the stairway she typically used. So that adds another little twist to it. You've got Bo the bloodhound. He puts his head in the car, gets a good heady sniff of the seat. That smell stays around their folds in their face, and that's one of their jowls. That's one of the reasons why bloodhounds are such good scenting dogs, because the scent remains in their skin folds and stuff. It's crazy. But anyway, so he gets a good sniff. And you got to think, this tracking animal has the ability to go in 365 different directions, right? But he happens to choose the exact same path that the suspect walked back. And on the path back, out of the Huntington, the suspect, I'm going to tell you, this is beside the dog. The suspect, there was another route he could have used. If he had been really familiar with Huntington, he didn't have to go around the pool. In fact, he could have avoided those security cameras and used the little back way. There's like a back sidewalk. I think it was behind the pool area to get out of the complex. But the suspect obviously didn't know that. So he could have avoided the security cameras. That tells you another thing about the suspect. He didn't necessarily know anything about the Huntington on the Green. He probably wasn't a resident, because if he was a resident, he would have probably known that if he used the pool at all. The dog can go in any direction. He chooses the track back to Jennifer's place. And on the path back, in my opinion, I believe that Jennifer's car was moved to make it look like she left the condo for work, and it's just a diversion tactic to keep the focus off Mosaic. Like, she left the condo, which I don't think she left, had her car leave of her own volition. I think she made it probably to the stairwell or to her car, and then that's when her agency was taken away. According to the crime scene that's on her hood, in my opinion, a struggle took place there. And I believe that the suspect who took her vehicle to within a range did so in order to, one, walk back on foot, which we saw the suspect do, which is a 15-minute walk back to Mosaic, and two, make it look like it didn't happen at Mosaic, and three, to perhaps buy more time with her in an empty apartment or something. The suspect or suspects wanted to disconnect Jennifer's disappearance from Mosaic. In my opinion, the only reason to do this is because the suspect is tied to Mosaic. Had the suspect an accomplice, there wouldn't be a need to walk back on foot, because the accomplice could follow you, and then you could just give them a ride after they drop off Jennifer's car. Unless the accomplice doesn't have a vehicle, or unless the accomplice has a vehicle and has Jennifer in that vehicle. Like, say, one person is taking care of Jennifer and the other one is getting rid of her vehicle. Note that the unit across from Jennifer's condo was vacant, in other words, completely empty and unlocked. However, the scent dogs that were taken up there and allowed to smell and search around, they had negative results in that empty apartment condo. In my opinion, based on the current evidence, is the timeline for her disappearance or her abduction is likely from 7 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. for the abduction portion, and high noon is the time period where you have the suspect dropping off her vehicle. If that is the end of the initial crime, if that's the bookend of this, then that's 5 hours. And with the fact that the car had not been driven very much, with this tight of a timeline, if that person was left to being on foot, and if Jennifer was abducted and murdered, and that person walked off at 12, then the body is probably within a 10 to 15 mile radius from Mosaic statistically. If that person was done and walking away and not later moving a body, then that she's probably not that far from Mosaic. Of course, if she was sex trafficked and taken elsewhere, that's an entirely different matter, and she could literally be anywhere at this point. And here's another reason that I believe firmly in the morning abduction theory, and that's because in the ensuing years, a witness has come forward. She goes by the nickname Juliet. She was in a big hurry, trying to get her husband to his first day of radiation treatment, and this was the morning that Jennifer went missing. All right, it was the 24th, and it was between 7 and 7:30 a.m. They're in a hurry to get to the radiation treatment. Their car was at Moxie and Conroy Road across from the Mosaic. So that's here where the yellow circle is. And they were coming on the other side of the yellow circle, which isn't pictured here. It's the bottom. All right. So they're at that intersection. And the Mosaic Millennia is that property at the bottom of the screen. The red X is Jennifer's condo. And then that's essentially the way that someone driving out of her place would get onto the road. Well, this is what the people saw. They saw a car coming out of the Mosaic, driving in a zigzag manner, extremely erratically. It was a 4-door black Malibu, and it was, the wife said it was like there was a struggle going on over a steering wheel because of the way that it was janking around, zigzagging. But they couldn't see the people inside, and then they were eager to make their turn and get going to the appointment. But as the wife sat waiting in the doctor's waiting room at the appointment, they kept discussing what they had seen. And she said it seemed like someone was fighting in that car. And the next day, she makes a report with the police. So this is where I'm going to end part 2. In part 3, we're going to pick up with the possible suspects. And there's a few to look at. But meanwhile, please look at this picture of the person of interest that dropped off Jennifer's car. This is the colorized version. I think this is the clearest version. Just please look at it and look at the picture of Jennifer. She had a shamrock tattoo on one of her buttocks. And so, if anything, if you've seen somebody with this tattoo, please call the contact information that I'm placing up here on the screen. If you have any information about this case, please reach out. Please do so. The family needs closure. Heck, the city needs closure. Please call Crime Line at 1-800-423-TIPS if you want to remain anonymous. You can go on the Facebook, find Jennifer Kesse, that's run by her family at her GoFundMe. Help us find Jennifer Kesse, also run by her family. The contact number is 941-201-4009, or you can call the Orlando Police Department. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you're staying safe, that you're staying healthy, and let's send the prayers up to Jennifer and her family, and let's just keep hope alive. So without further ado, have an excellent day. Bye.